Aloha and welcome to the Two-Wheel Revolution here on ThinkTech I'm your host, Peter Rosegg. We have a great show for you today. Two people from the government who are here to help us. And we're going to end after a very interesting discussion with a micromobility moment. So stick with us. Aloha and welcome back. We're very fortunate today to have a couple of guests. Let me start by introducing John Nouchi, who is the Deputy Director of the Department of Transportation Services for the City and County of Honolulu. John, thanks for being here.
Hello, Peter. Great to be here.
And we have Renee Espiau, who is the Administrator for the Complete Streets program. Renee, thank you as well. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you.
Yep, my pleasure.
All right. So let me start directly with what do you see as the role of personal mobility in planning for the Honolulu's transportation services? When I say personal mobility, of course, I mean bicycling, e-bikes, but now we see more e-scooters and e-skateboards and those unicycles. And so we're seeing more and more of those. What do you see? How do those fit into our transportation services? John, why don't you start?
Peter, I really like that term, personal mobility. We've vacillated between small shared mobility, small mobility, micro mobility. We have all these terms, and I think personal mobility kind of does say it best. It's everything smaller than a car, everything smaller than the things that we're generally used to. And I think it's a good time for us to kind of take stock and figure out what our city is going to enable and what we're going to have thrive as mobility for our residents. And we want to look at a variety of ways that people can get around. And I've always looked at transportation in our city as, we have to look at all the assets we have and all the assets we can mobilize. I think until not that long ago, we basically had, you could walk, you could take the bus, or you could drive. And, those are three options. But in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen the industry provide all kinds of stuff. Some call it disruptive, some call it innovative. And, I know our topic today is on the two-wheeled mobility innovation. And it might not actually have two wheels. It might have three, it might have zero. I don't know, hoverboards, Back to the Future made it popular back in the day in the 80s, but we don't even know. So we have to do our best to kind of foretell, to be visionary and see what might end up on our streets. And, as our Department of Transportation Services, that's a big difference in our department's name. It's actually providing services, providing means for people to get around. I think we have a really great team in place to facilitate just getting around our city in different ways, ways that we're familiar with, ways that we know, but we're about to advance into just new ways that we never maybe contemplated not that long ago. And I'm really happy to have our Complete Streets Administrator, Renee Espiau, here to talk about why Complete Streets are so important to that effort.
All right, let's go to Renee. Renee, why are they so important, and how do these personal mobility devices, in addition to walking, fit into that plan?
So as you guys likely know, we are a growing city in Honolulu, right? We're increasing density. We've got high-rise towers going up all over. And we actually really have to shift how we move around in cities because we cannot, continue to drive kind of at the rates that we have traditionally, given the densities that we have coming to Honolulu. So it's really imperative on us to provide facilities to help people make that transition and be more sustainable and more affordable and just more efficient in how they move around our urban areas, so that we're not all sort of trapped in our vehicles and stuck in traffic. And those people who do need to move around by vehicles can move around more freely. So it's an important element of kind of our transition as a city. There's obviously other really important reasons. Safety is one that is increasingly apparent, both to us and I think to the public. We've seen some pretty high profile crashes recently. And so it's really critical for us to get better facilities out on the streets to make sure everybody out on the roads are able to travel around safely.
Terrific, thank you. So we've seen a growth, I think everybody would agree, in bike lanes. They've expanded and they're continuing to do so. I think it started in the previous administration, but certainly it's continuing in this one. And so I wonder, do you get more complaints from the drivers or who say, oh, no, enough of this already? Or do you get more complaints from bicyclists who are saying, well, I want more, I want more, I want more?
You know, it's interesting. One of the areas most weaponized on our roads is the clash between drivers and bicyclists.
Mhm.
I think everybody, if we were to just say that, you know, we want to put more sidewalks out there, nobody fights about sidewalks. Everybody would agree that sidewalks are a good thing. However, when it gets down to the division between bicyclists and you know, road users who are the drivers, that's where we end up with the most conflict. And both sides will accuse the other side of over dramatizing their needs or their causes, or overstating how these spaces should be used. If a lot of drivers say that, you know, they're a group of bicyclists coming and just, you know, coming with their torches and saying we need the space, the bicyclists will also say the same about the drivers. But complete streets, our program of complete streets is in place through city ordinance, and it forces us, it compels us to actually look at how the streets are used. And every time we touch a street, a city road, we are compelled to actually look at how we might make that a more complete street. So Renee, if you want to talk about that, I think that's a part of the understanding of everyone out there, how the roads will be contemplated.
Yeah, so John was alluding to the city's complete streets ordinance. This was passed in 2012. And it is not a suggestion, it is a requirement. And it says basically every time the city touches a street, and the most common way that we touch streets is for maintenance and repaving, we basically have to consider everybody out there using the road and start to introduce some new design features that we had sort of conventionally, traditionally omitted in favor of just moving vehicles as quickly as possible. So we have lots of corridors island-wide that we are looking at for transitioning our streets to be safer, to be more accommodating, and happy to share some of those specific projects too with you guys today.
Okay, before you do that, I will say, I think, you know, one person can have both emotions. When I'm driving down King Street and I'm about to make a left turn and I realize I have to look both ways for cyclists, one part of my brain says, oh, damn. And the other part of my brain says, this is a good thing. So, you know, I think it's possible to have more than one idea in your head at the same time to realize the value. But at the same time, you know, every time I go over a speed bump on the poly, I get the same thing in my head. Oh, shucks, or some word like that. But this is a good thing. So how do you get people to come more along with the you know, telling people it's the rule, it's the law, it's the rules, we got to do it? That'll go so far, but I think people need to be convinced of the actual value of what you're trying to do here. How do you do that?
So
Yeah.
I think we actually are getting there already just by introducing these projects, right? When the King Street Bikeway opened in 2014, it was like nothing anybody had ever seen here in Honolulu. And the complaints came in for years, to be honest. And I think some people are probably still adjusting to it. But as we've kind of rolled out, you know, consecutive projects on Pensacola and Ward, and the upcoming projects we've got in Kaka'ako and downtown, we're seeing more public acceptance, I think more public understanding of the purpose of those, as well as how they operate. So I think, you know, we're sort of breaking through some of that unknown, and the public seems to be understanding, you know, what we're trying to accomplish, and hopefully having a little more consideration for other folks who maybe choose different transportation choices than they do.
And Peter, you know, when we go out into the public, we of course absorb a lot of the feeling out there, people's emotions about the project, and other proposals we have that are upcoming. One of the things that we've pledged to do is be highly data driven. The data around these newer bike facilities. And, maybe we shouldn't even we should start pivoting towards a new term for them, not calling them just bike facilities. They're like mobility lanes that aren't for cars, but for everything else that is smaller and not a car. But we look at the data surrounding those, and we use that as our North Star, in that we can generally see an increase of safety and a reduction in crashes. So to us, that's everything. And we also, with every project that we put in that touches the road, we do significant amount of traffic analyses to show that we're not having an extremely adverse impact on the existing traffic flow. We're not saying that we won't have any. Most of the projects, there's some trade-off. You can't take something and get nothing, so we always like to look at that data, not only in advance of the project in planning, but actually the follow-up afterwards to make sure that it has the intended effects that we had wanted.
Yeah, John's absolutely right. I'd like to jump in a bit, going back to King Street and talk about the data there.
Sure.
So we had about 300 people a day riding bikes on King Street before we put in the protected facility. Most of those folks were on the sidewalk, which of course is not great for pedestrians, especially our kupuna, who feel very uncomfortable, sharing that small space with people moving at the speed of bikes. Today, we see about 1,000 people a day, and the vast majority, 95% or so, are on the bike lane. I don't know what is wrong with those people who are still on the sidewalk. I kind of want to yell at them. But we've seen huge changes in encouraging people to ride, and just better behavior overall. So we do know that these projects do work. They can change people's daily habits. When we put protection out there instead of just, a painted stripe on the road, people really do have a different sense of how it feels. I also want to call out our pedestrian crashes along King Street have been cut in half since putting in that bike facility, for the same reasons you talked about, Peter, with people making left turns with a bit more caution, right? Because they're looking for bikes kind of both ways. And the pedestrians out there are actually benefiting from that driver behavior as well. Sometimes when things feel a little more dangerous, like say roundabouts or narrower lanes or having bike lanes on the street, drivers will sometimes approach them more cautiously and more slowly. So it's a little counterintuitive sometimes, but we actually are seeing really positive changes in travel behavior out there as a result of some of these projects.
Yeah, I read about a city in Europe, or a town probably, that they removed all their street signs. And everybody thought, oh my God, that's going to result in all kinds of danger. But in fact, it made things safer because everybody just got a little more careful. So I don't think that's going to happen here, but I think that goes to your point about, everybody's kind of taking a breath and realizing they have to be more careful. And the other point, when I talk to bicycle people, everybody says, oh, Amsterdam, oh, Copenhagen, but that didn't happen overnight. It happened over the course of decades, actually. So you guys are sort of the first early step in that journey to me, and I think that's great. So you were going to talk about, Renee, you're going to talk about some projects that are upcoming. I know you're in the middle of the Keeaumoku Street redesign process. What else is going on? You or John, whoever, you're both probably on it.
So the most near-term projects that people are going to see are in Kaka'ako and in downtown. We have two pretty major paving projects that are ongoing that we work with our Department of Design and Construction on, and they are actually going to be painting first in Kaka'ako on Cook Street, Oahe, Hohukaina, and some on Kamakei. They're going to be painting some new bike lanes there, and some of those are protected too with our delineator posts. And then the next project you're going to see right after that, later this year, you're going to see some protected bike facilities finally coming to downtown Honolulu. So we've got the extension of King Street to Alakea. We have the new Alakea facility there. And then Richard Street and Punch Bowl will also get new facilities. So those are the most near term. And then, as you alluded to, we are laying plans for Keeaumoku Street, which will be paved in several years. And we've also got other projects such as University Avenue that are also going to be transitioned in the coming years. So lots of stuff both in town, but we've also got stuff outside of the urban core. Kaneohe, for example, we've got some new bike lanes and some significant sidewalk improvements coming. Kailua, right? We always try to support that kind of biking community there, and even others around the island. So really excited to see all these projects moving forward.
That's terrific. And I will say, I, talked to my friend Todd at Beaky, and well, when are you going to get out of, your present footprint? And they've expanded it up to UH and other directions, but there's a lot of this island that's left without the opportunity to jump on a Beaky that would probably do it if they had a station nearby and if they had the infrastructure to get there. So I'm glad to hear you're thinking about Kaneohe and Kailua and other places.
Oh, and sorry, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention North King Street. Sorry.
Okay.
Our Kalihi neighbors right here, super close to the urban core, but not able to take advantage of our growing bike lane network. So really excited to, in the next year or two, put that out for bid for construction too.
All right, that's terrific.
So Peter, there's a lot that goes on, when we're doing this planning, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it, I like to think of it as a tug of war, a chicken and egg. When we put in some of these facilities, people go, well, nobody's riding bike anyway. I don't see anybody riding bike.
Right.
But it's one of those things where if we don't put them in, I think one of the things we've heard the most, even from advocates, is I would ride a bike if I felt I could do it more safely.
Right.
And I would say I don't think we're there yet. We have not expanded a robust network of these facilities such that you can get almost anywhere on the island. And so as we grow that certainty for people, and we people will start to think, hey, maybe I can do this, and Renee bringing up North King is actually very, very, very notable, because North King, if you look at that whole area, I mean, it leads out of Chinatown, it goes into Kalihi, and Kalihi is definitely a working class neighborhood, and it has all the things of a really well balanced place. It mixes industrial, commercial, and residential, and it kind of does that in some of the oldest parts of our city. Now, that being said, you would think that all that density and all that industrial and transit and vehicular traffic does not make for a hospitable place for bike riders. So you would think people don't ride bikes in Kalihi, but if you go out there, you will see that people endure those conditions and ride a lot of bikes in Kalihi. So we look at, the fact that we look at that like pent up demand, and we're not even at if you build it, they will come. If we build it, we should have built it before because they're already there.
Yeah, I agree. Couldn't agree with you more. And I mean, there's the Kalihi Valley bike group that's back there refurbing bikes, and a lot of kids are a lot more kids probably are on bikes in Kalihi than in Hawaii Kai, I would guess. But there's an area where a lot of people are trying to get to Waikiki, trying to get to Alamana area where their jobs are, and they'd take a bike most days, many days, if only it was a little safer and a little more assured and a little easier. I think you're absolutely right on that.
Yeah, so we actually have some data on that too. To counter the, nobody's gonna bike, what are you guys doing this for? We actually did a survey several years ago, and it was Honolulu based, and we found out that about 45% of our population is really interested in biking, but is terrified to get out there without protected facilities. So we know that the numbers are there if we can provide the facilities. We also know that in the urban core, most trips are less than 3 miles. Which is like a perfect distance, right, for a bicycle ride. So the numbers are certainly on our side.
Well, that's good to know, and we just have to get that information out to more people. So let me change tacks a little bit. The number of vehicles, of personal mobility vehicles, is growing. I think we've seen the numbers. I was amazed to see in the paper the other day that there'd been more e-bike registrations in the first 2 months of this year than in all of the year before. And I know many e-bikes probably don't even get registered. You can go into Costco or a big box and buy an e-bike today for $400 to $600. So we're definitely seeing this revolution. It's not coming, it's here. And there are more scooters and there are more skateboards. And I wonder if you're beginning to see conflicts. These things operate at different speeds, different kinds of e-bikes at different speeds, the skates, the scooters, all these things. Are we heading for some kind of a clash within the protected bike lanes, and how do we avoid what we obviously don't want to see happen there?
I think if we don't take a good look at the lay of the land, all the devices that are available, all that diversity out there, we're gonna have some sort of something Mageddon. And Renee and I were just discussing this yesterday about how we generally take a curb lane and we do a two-way cycle facility in there. But perhaps, looking towards the future, maybe that's not enough. We have other things like, Renee, if you want to talk about like NACTO, that's a National Association of City Transportation Officials. They're starting to look at new guidance for different types of vehicles that operate. And, arguably some of them are amongst us already. I don't know if it happens in this city, but in other cities, UPS and FedEx and other partners are using bicycles. But we do have really early adopters of e-bikes. Domino's, they've been using e-bikes. A lot of even DoorDash and those other types of food delivery services have equipped cadre of people who actually use these vehicles to make their deliveries. But Renee, like if you want to talk a little bit about how maybe we have to start pivoting on looking at different sizes, I think that's kind of an interesting discussion.
Yeah, so we've traditionally designed our bike facilities kind of to the minimum we can squeeze in, without having to impact too much of the rest of the road. But what we're seeing from the national guidance is that those lane widths are generally not wide enough for these new devices that we're seeing. I know, for example, we have a few friends who have cargo bikes and they put their little kids in them, right? They throw the diaper bag in there and then they can kind of cruise around town. But when you start to think about maybe needing to pass a regular bicyclist or someone on a scooter needing to pass a cargo bike, these are bigger dimensions, they're different dimensions than we're used to working with. So that's one element. The other thing that we're really seeing, and that I know folks who have gone to continent cities and ridden the e-scooters, is the attention to the pavement quality too, right? A lot of these devices have very small wheels. Unlike bicycles, they're not able to take potholes and kind of imperfections in the pavement quite as well. So those are some of the guidance that we're seeing coming from our national association that's really focused on encouraging these kinds of modes is, think better or think bigger and think better.
And just to follow up on that too, I mean, we don't know. We have to be, I guess, open-minded about what's coming. Other cities have started to deploy delivery drones. So little autonomous robots that actually currently are remote controlled from remote sites. But whether we allow those on the sidewalk or whether they go in these multimodal lanes, in these shared lanes, or how those operate, we have to start thinking about that. In addition to the fact that a lot of online shopping, as people are starting to pivot away from brick and mortar, those delivery services may start to use larger style cargo bikes that are available in places like Taiwan or Singapore. And, the one message that I think consistently we've heard loud and clear is these higher speed electric devices should not be operated on the sidewalk. And I think we have that as our guiding principle. We know that if you have an e-bike that can go up to 19 miles an hour, it does a lot against a kupuna who's walking 2 miles an hour.
Right.
And, sometimes you have things that happen to you that, you'll always reflect on personally. And when I was walking in Portland, I had a scooter crash into me and I got knocked over. And, the optics of that is just terrible, but it happened.
Yeah. So speaking of scooters, we all probably remember the Lime disaster of a couple of years ago, but I know there are scooter companies that are hoping the city will move along so they could bring scooters. I mean, they're obviously in Waikiki and Kaka'ako already, with or without. What's the status of that? When are we going to get? Because I think we'd all rather see it official and regulated than kind of haphazard and catch as catch can. Where are we on that? I know the super pedestrian wants to come here. I think Lime probably wants to come back and do it right this time. Where are we on getting some kind of a right way to do scooters?
So I can offer a status. So we currently have an ordinance in place that has a permitting framework for shared mobility fleets. So say the electric scooter fleets. What the companion piece that we have to figure out, and that we have been working on pretty extensively in coordination with scooter providers and the public, is how do we legalize their operations on city and county roads? The state legislature did incorporate that as a mode, as something in the traffic code, but it did allow home rule to prevail and allowed each county to adopt them in their own ordinances. Now, I think that's a very smart approach, and I thank the legislature for that position, because it allowed each island to kind of take into account how these things operate in their context, right? One of the things that we would, again, safety being the ultimate guiding principle, in addition to the shared fleets, these types of devices, scooters and other things, are just a lot of them are personally owned now. And so not just for the shared fleets, but for those that are operating scooters on their own, we want to have a legal framework for their operation. But first of all, we want to make sure everybody can do it safely. And so we're considering where they may operate. And again, I think one of the things I can assuredly say, even though we still have to run this ordinance through the public process at our city council, is I don't anticipate these electric foot scooters ever operating legally on sidewalks. I think they do not mix, and I think we've heard our pedestrian community loud and clear. So to that end, we then have to figure out where they do operate. And that's the part we're going to be working through the legal process on how to keep the riders the most safe. And even shared fleets aside, how do we keep everybody who's using these devices safe?
Yeah. And how do we park them also once you get to wherever you're going is the other, I mean, that begins, even if you say you can't ride them in the street, you're going to end up with some of them being parked on you can't ride them on the sidewalk. Sorry, you're going to they have to be parked somewhere or left somewhere or hooked up somewhere. So I'm glad to hear that's moving along. We're reaching the end of our half hour, and I could talk to each of you probably separately for another hour, because this is really great stuff, and I'm thrilled that we're in such good hands. I joked about people from the government being here to help us, but I think you really are, both of you. I'm very impressed, and I'm sure other people will be as they watch this. So I want to thank you both very much. Stick around for a minute. We're going to do a micro-mobility moment. I'd like to have each of you back, maybe separately, maybe together, and we can continue this conversation some months from now when we see how things go downtown and in Kakaako especially. Thank you both, John. Thank you, Renee, so much. I really appreciate your being on the show.
Yep. Mahalo, Peter.
And now we're going to go, in the last minute or so we have left, we're going to go to our micromobility moment. We try to bring you something interesting, weird, wacky, or important from the world of micromobility every 2 weeks when we do the show. Here's our micromobility moment for this week. Next slide. So there is a group of people very well known for their distinctive way of life. They have distinguishing clothing. They avoid modern devices. And they drive one-horse buggies, and they turn out to be very fond of a kind of micromobility. And what kind is it? Electric bicycles. And who is it? You probably figured it out already. It's the Amish. The Amish traditionally use this kind of a scooter, big wheel scooter, kind of a bike scooter. That's been a traditional Amish travel device for a long, long time. And now it is going the next step. And so we see more and more, not all the Amish, because they all have different kinds of rules and regulations, but the Amish have become, in parts of Amish country, big fans of electric bicycles, and stores and shops that used to or still have places for them to tie up their buggies and feed and water their horses now have installed charge spots so they can have their electric bicycles charged. And to me, that's amazing. Here are the sources for this information. If you don't believe me, you can read it online. So it must be true. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to our guests, John Nouchi and Renee Espiau from the city and county. And thank you to all my regular viewers for joining us. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. Aloha.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.